Good evening. Brother Joe 7 here, out here on the High Plains Homestead. In a limited number of videos that we'll be making out here. Also, baby Michael, you will hear and maybe see here in a little while. And tonight, for this fireside chat, I'm going to get my, I guess I'm trying on my old motivational speaker hat, and I'm going to talk to you about self-imposed limitations, self-limitations, or another way to think about it would be being your own advocate versus being your own adversary. So, I've heard it described, well, let me not get ahead of myself. This idea of self-imposed limitations is related to like positive mental attitude, but inversely, or it has a negative relation there. Instead of thinking or saying, I can do it, I can do anything, sort of along that idea, it's more like, I can't do it until I do some other thing. And I understand like a reward system is good. You know, I can't have this little fox deal that I really want until I get rid of this water bottle deal. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when you use it as a limitation. When you say to yourself, instead of pursuing this thing, I am going to use my procrastination on task A to prevent myself from doing task B, C, D, E, or F, or whatever it is, however many things. Not in a reward setup, but in a, I can't do anything else until I get this thing done. But then not spending all of your available time getting this thing done, especially when you have, let's say this is a big task, and this is a task that would take 4 hours, and you waste multiple 4-hour blocks of time because you haven't done this yet, instead of getting this thing done and then getting this done, okay? So, I've had it explained to me by a really wise man named Blackie, who talked about how people build their own personal prison, and they build it one bar at a time. They take the bars and they stick them up there, and they take the bricks and they cement them in, and then they complain about how they're living in this prison and how there's nothing they can do because of this prison, or how, you know, life's so hard because of these problems that they have that they created for themselves. So I'm going to talk to you about taking those prison bars and getting rid of them. Can't do this, can't do that because of this prison that they live in. And of course that's a metaphor, but it's a pretty good one. And then the way that I like to talk about it is using biblical terminology and talking about a stumbling block. You know, like a big thing in the path that you trip over. And I talk about how people select their own stumbling block, and then they stick it there in the road, and they take other stumbling blocks and they put it there in the road, and then they talk about how they can't walk down the road because of all these stumbling blocks that are in their way, but they put them there themselves. They put their own limitation, right? This is a limitation that they create, and then they complain about their inability to complete something or an inability to act because of said limitation, which is truly self-imposed. Now, for my own example, recently, and what really brought this to mind is this sheath that I have. And I made a video about making this sheath a while back, months. And I had this idea in my mind about how I was going to get this sheath done. And I had set my own limitation here. I wanted to create the sheath using thread that I made out of yucca that I had harvested. I thought it would be this whole, you know, culmination of awesomeness that would come together into a really awesome sheath. And, you know, the threading that I had sewn it with would be made out of this yucca thread that I had taken from the yucca. And I made a couple videos about making thread out of the yucca just itself. And initially, the stuff was really strong. Then I didn't do anything with it for a while, and it got all dried out, and it was no longer strong. It was like dried grass. And that idea that I had about making the sheath with the yucca thread was that self-imposed limitation. It was that prison bar that I had created for myself. And only a couple days ago, I realized it. I had an epiphany, and I came to the understanding that I had set this block in front of myself, and I was not completing the sheath because of this block that I had made of the yucca thread. And so the solution that I came up with when I realized the problem, which is you created a self-limitation, you don't have yucca thread. But that's not an end of the world situation. I realized, do something else. And so I had read some articles. I mean, I wanted it to still be really, really strong and durable, and I wanted it to be really cool. I think it's less cool. But I had read some articles in a great magazine called The Backwoodsman, and the person talked about artificial sinew. And I still am not 100% sure what artificial sinew is, but I think it's dental floss. I think that's what artificial sinew is, because it's very high tensile and it's kind of waxy, and sinew is really high tensile and it's kind of fatty, waxy. And so I said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it that way. And I took like 2 hours of work, and I have mint waxed floss, minty fresh artificial sinew. I talked about this more in detail in the video, but I took about 2 hours, you know, the better chunk of an afternoon, and I took the knife that I have already made a video on, the old knife that I had fixed in the past, and I took the piece of leather that I had cut out and intended for it, and I kind of derped around with it, and I chose, you know, more or less, trial and error, and I got it put together, and I'm very, very happy with the end product. Am I as happy with it as if I would have had the yucca thread? Well, no. But am I more happy with it than when I didn't have a sheath at all, because I had imposed a limitation on myself of yucca thread? Heck yeah, I am. Now I have a sheath, and I think it's pretty sweet looking. Yeah, it's got green here instead of tan from yucca, but I was planning on dyeing the yucca thing anyways. And this also, I guess, kind of comes into the idea of, like, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid. It works, and I have a sheath now. I saw that I had limited myself. I removed that self-limitation, and I achieved grand success of a sheath for my sweet knife that now I can carry it around with myself. And take this. You've probably heard about learning from your mistakes. Learn from your mistakes so you don't have to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And I'd heard that a lot, and what I have added to it, and what I think you can take away from here, is learn from other people's mistakes. If you can learn from someone else's mistake, you don't have to make the mistake. You don't have to learn that bad lesson. You can learn it from him learning the bad lesson. So please don't self-limit yourself. Take it from me. It's better to notice that you have created that problem. I can't build a chicken coop until I get my house sided. Well, you could, since you're not siding the house today, go work on a chicken coop. That's that idea between the reward and the limitation. If you are limiting yourself to the detriment of your overall success, don't do that, okay? Find out what you're limiting yourself with and remove it. Get yourself a grand success. And you know what? Down the line, when you finally do make that yucca thread, you can cut the dental floss out and you can sew it back up with yucca thread. Or you can make a whole nother sheet. Alright. I hope this has been beneficial to y'all. I hope it works. Shalom.